Um, I have some things prepared that I thought might help provide some structure and help maybe all of us, whether we're doing it in real time right now, or maybe any of you that are coming in watching this pre-recorded, to be able to kind of come to a centered point or talking points on this. So in short, I have some things prepared. I have a few slides, a handful of slides, but I hope to go through those things relatively quickly, so that it'll allow plenty of time, i.e. like maybe the second half at least, 50% of the time for questions, discussion, and kind of see where this goes. As we know, this if you're tuning in, that this is a two-parter coming out of COVID. So in part, we can kind of see how this goes and what questions, concerns we collectively have that can also kind of guide our discussion next time. I was going to just at least kind of, hi Ann, I was going to mention just real briefly in terms of my background, so that you can kind of know just the vantage point of mine and where I come and what I do and don't bring to this conversation. I am a psychologist, and then separate from like a psychiatrist, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't prescribe, not able to prescribe medications, but my journey has involved learning all about the mind and brain and mental processes, researching them, teaching them, evaluating them, providing therapy services for them, supervision and consultation. All this is to say, I feel like, in all these years, I've come to appreciate what little I don't know, or how much we don't know about the mind and mental processes. But what I hope to at least maybe bring even more to this discussion is my more recent work in dealing with anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, phobias, and all kinds of heavy emotions. I love anxiety, as strange as that is to say, and I love talking about it and examining it. So I think for that reason as well, I was excited to be able to talk with and spend time with you all today. And also, I do, for those of you that are familiar with cognitive behavior therapy, my shtick involves a lot of really understanding how to help people, utilizing tools that examine and address the connections among what we think, how we feel in our bodies, and what we do. So maybe more on that as we jump in a little more. So again, just as a reminder, this is recorded, and there will be plenty of time, as I said, for like the second half, if not more. I'm prepared to kind of adjust along the way, for us to share impressions, ask questions, and just talk. I'll tell you a little bit about my roadmap and kind of feel the room in terms of how this might go. I thought about taking us through a relatively quick mindful exercise, maybe to kind of help us center and bring us together, maybe less than 5 minutes on that. Because I feel like one of the challenges in this coming out of COVID is how to contemplate this. But in reality, what do we need to think about? What do we need to be contemplating? So I think it's fine to spend as much time as needed to even determine that, rather than kind of running off contemplating what we feel like we have to, when we're not really sure where we're at. So my hope today, if nothing else, is to help maybe all of us, myself included, know a little bit more where we've landed right now. So I have a few resources and things regarding that. So far, any objections or any concerns with that game plan? All right. Well, if anyone wants to hijack it at any point, well, just jump in. So I first looked to the Centering Space website, which I love. I haven't participated in any of the things, but I've already come to love Centering Space with the resources and the mission there. But looking first at the, the welcome to Centering Space, a place for centered care, contemplation, action, renewal, and expression. And I really feel like what we will be honing in on in this time together is contemplation. And I'm reading from the site. You're invited to take a pause. You do not have to still the storm. Gales blow through life regardless of our plans. And it goes on. And so finding our center. So if you're willing to participate, you don't have to, but I'd like to just lead us through a guided meditation, mindfulness exercise, but really it's an exercise on self-observation. And that's kind of the first step in all of this, so that we can observe where we are in this moment. So and again, you don't have to participate in this, but even listening along can be a helpful thing. I'm gonna read through the script I have here, and this may be one where you want to kind of get in a comfortable space to try to. I always encourage people, if they can kind of let their arms hang. Sometimes that's the easiest way to get yourself to open up and let the lungs do what they naturally really want to do. And if you want to close your eyes, if that's comfortable, great. Because I'm going to talk, you don't have to look at anything. Or if you just want to focus on one specific spot in your surrounding that may help you center for a moment, just to take a minute to find your comfortable spot and focus, and just listen as you are able. So I ask you to bring your attention right now to your body. And as you notice your body, be aware that you are noticing it. There's your body, and there you are, observing it. Your body changes continuously. Over a period of 7 years, every single cell in your body gets replaced. At the atomic level, 95% of the atoms in your body are replaced. The you that notices your body does not change. Once again, notice your body and be aware that you're noticing it. There's your body, and there's you. And now bring your attention to your thoughts. And as you notice your thoughts, be aware that you're noticing them. There are your thoughts, and there you are observing them. Your thoughts change constantly. Sometimes you're optimistic, approving. Sometimes you're negative, dismissive, and sometimes you worry. The you that notices your thoughts does not change. So once again, notice your thoughts and be aware that you're noticing them. There are your thoughts, and there are you. There's you. And now bring your attention to the things you do. Your roles change continuously. Now you're in the role of attending this. At other times, you're in the role of a parent, a sibling, a child, citizen, an employee. The you that notices all these roles doesn't change. And so once again, notice all the things you do and be aware that you're noticing them. There are your roles, and then there's you. And observing yourself in this way is the observing self. And the observing self is like the sky. Whereas your body, your thoughts, and all the things you do you can think of as the weather. And like the sky, you have room for all of it. And like the weather, all of these things will change. And so as you consider that, breathe comfortably and think about those things as you are able, as we come together for this time together we have. Okay. That you may have noticed, as a good cognitive behavior therapist, I try to make the opening mindfulness exercise have to do with thoughts, and body, and behaviors. And there's so much with that we're managing right now, but there is something to the observing self being can handle all of this. So any questions or thoughts before I pull up my slides and share a few things with you? Okay. All right, how about we'll go through those, and then we have some talking points. Let's see, share screen. On the middle part. Let's get at the beginning. All right. Are y'all seeing my title page? Okay. Let's move that. That was the part from Centering Space that I read. We're on contemplation. So we're all invited here to pause. And first, let's determine what we're talking about. Friends, post-pandemic is here. Now, whether we like it or not, the language of it is here. What does it mean to be in this phase in time in which, whether we like it or not, people are using the term post-pandemic? And the question that I have for myself and that I have for you all, and that we might, maybe we'll put some words to, is, so what are we going to do? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? I also want to share some words of wisdom from acceptance and commitment therapy is a related offshoot, godsend, frankly, to cognitive behavior therapy that incorporates in a lot of mindfulness. And there's a recent blog post from Stephen C. Hayes that some aspects I just thought were just on point, and I couldn't have said it better myself, and I wanted to share. And I think could orient us as well. So a few slides on this that I'm excited to share with you. And there's his. So he did a blog post actually just a few weeks ago, and he titled it, "Why I Always Sign My Mails Like This." He always signs it Peace, Love, and Life, Stephen C. Hayes. So if you're tempted to reach out to him and get a response from him, you're going to see his tag, Peace, Love, and Life. And let's see, I actually can't read all of this. Okay. The you, so this, what are you going to do? This was the question I had, and then ran across his blog post. And I'm interested to, I encourage you with this, to kind of reflect on your reactions to this, questions that come up. And try to make mental note or write them down, because they could be like real gems for us to talk about here in just a little bit. But he says, and I'm going to read aloud just so we can kind of sit with this. The you that's being talked about, and what are you going to do, is the part of you that is aware of, interested in, and deliberately elaborating planful thought. But your body and your brain are not restricted to the symbolically thinking you. Your learning systems, history, and underlying biophysiology have been along for this ride too, and they tap into processes that are 1,000 times older, evolutionarily speaking, than the cognitive skills inside the modern expansion of time, place, and person that is so disorienting to us all. And so the reason why I pulled this is really in my thinking about this, and fortunately, in terms of figuring out what to do, I think we have to look at where we are currently and where we have been. And this is a road I continue to kind of come back to over and over in my work, is that we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes we have to look at what's been happening and really look at it. And there's the information there and the information that we need. I think this point of his is also an important one, is that, you know, as we're thinking through all this, you know, and our brains are like trying to make sense and make plans and everything, we cannot deny the fact that everything else within our minds and bodies are reacting and have been reacting for longer than we've even been here, if you kind of think about it that way. But why does he sign it? Peace, love, and life. Okay. Peace. So here's what he's talking about with peace. Peace of mind is planted by openness to experience and the wholeness of awareness itself. You get to practice that in your waking day. But as you calm your mind and release your grasping, you train the more ancient parts of you to see your current situation as psychologically safe. The alarm systems are quieted. Needless brain activity and interconnectivity that emerges from excessive attempts at verbal regulation or defense of a narrative self all begin to fade. The parts of your nervous system that turn down arousal kick in. You are less busy while asleep. Your body begins to reflect the peace of mind you've learned to produce. And I like this phrase. It says, your influence is by focusing on the ability you have to respond while awake. You take responsibility for your life in the areas you are able to respond. So, you know, you may already kind of notice in here, this is where the practice of being able to be mindful and to slow down and do that is sometimes that's the only way we can talk to the parts of our brain and give the parts of our brain the time and space to bring things down a little bit. You know, we can tell ourselves as much as calm down, but sometimes we have to slow down and really sit with and examine where we are in order for, frankly, our autonomic nervous system to kick in the other part that says we don't have to, the alarm bells can turn off now and we can get back to homeostasis. So that's peace, according to Stephen C. Hayes. Love. Here's what he says about love. So love is about purpose. It's who and how you want to be in the world, with yourself and with others. It's a choice, not so much a feeling. It's your values and action, the commitments you make to create positive, healthy, caring habits instead of indulging yourself in cynicism, judgment, resentment, hopelessness, anger, and victimhood as your daily diet. When you feed your whole self, your whole body, heart, and mind, a diet of loving purpose that you choose, you are also programming your more ancient neurobiological systems to be prepared for a positive challenge. And so even if that day is filled with chaos and things you do not like, you can love the challenge of being the best you, the person who can love and care for others and yourself, even amidst a chaotic and challenging world. And of course, we're going to get to life. Now, as we jump into life, this is again, this is Stephen C. Hayes' point of view, but also I want to, at least acknowledge that I'm inclined to say, like, let's just go ahead and look at the scary thing and then talk about it. Okay, so hang in there with me on a few paragraphs here. Okay, don't give it a few minutes if you kind of have a reaction. How's that for a setup? Don't want to make people nervous. Okay. Life, according to Stephen Hayes, is the process of putting all that together and creating your problems on purpose. You already have won the game. The first 2 steps make that a certainty, regardless of the situation. But now you get to change situations, not as a fix, but as an expression of a life worth living. The whole process is called life. We often say, such is life, with an air of benign sadness about how the arc of life contains the pain of destroyed dreams. It's true, it does, always. Other than through leaps of faith, in the end, it's a big ice ball and you are going to die, and everyone and everything you care about will do the same. But if you inhale all of that, and surround all of that with peace and loving purpose, you can say that old cliche in a new way, as the bold, courageous, silly, awesome creatures we are, the ones who know how to spit into the eye of the mental dinosaur and say, I'm not giving up now. Not now. Not in this moment. In this moment, you get to see this. Such is life. And so he signs it this way. He says mental and behavioral resilience is 5 out of 5, 24/7. It's not distressing that it's so. It means you are not alone and you have all the time you need to learn how to be centered amidst the chaos of rapid change. Peace, love, and life. Steve and Ellie. So, all right, friends. Just so this, I'm gonna cut out of this very, very soon. But these are the questions that I have for myself and for you. And if we, you don't have to share. But I do encourage everyone to kind of at least pause with this and maybe consider thinking about these things more. So like, where are you right now? Where am I right now with all of this? And do you know how you're feeling? And do you know all of your feelings? Just as a quick, funny kind of sidebar. So psychologists are really good at like taking all these things and trying to simplify them, but yet making them appear even like more complicated. So this is our friendly little feelings wheel. So if you need help identifying feelings, we'll get you a feelings wheel. But the point of this, and again, I'm happy to share any of these resources. I mean, they'll be on the recording, of course. If anybody wants copies, I'll be happy to email or post. I mean, any of these feelings, of course, are game. People are talking a lot these days in this area, scared, anxious. And as you see in this feeling wheel, there's many nuances to, or pieces to scared, mad, sad. And then also they can be vary in degree. You can, in terms of feeling insecure, foolish, submissive, weak. So without going through all the emotions, when I say, so how are you feeling? It's like, where do I begin? And how extreme is it? And how colorful is it? But here is one piece of advice, or at least in sharing from my work, that I think sometimes can provide the information that you need, is where have you been? I think it is helpful and maybe we can talk a little bit about this, to take the time to observe all your experiences over the past year. I mean, a lot has happened with all of us individually. A lot of events, a lot of things of repetition, a lot of, going to bed and waking up, a lot of meals, a lot of takeout meals, a lot of Zoom meetings. And like, what all have you done, over this time? And if you don't feel like you've done a lot, I think, ask yourself, what all have you done? And what all have you felt? And so if you think, I've felt depressed the whole time. Okay. but what else did you feel? And how did you think about all of this, what you did and how you felt? Um, Pulling from the previous slides, love being, if you want to think of one aspect of love, could be how you put your values into action. Perhaps a corollary question is, so what are your values now? What do you want to do with all of this if you're able? What's important to you now that might help you know what direction to go now? These are all general questions. So I'm gonna pull out of this and okay. Hi. Does anybody want to, well, first off, just share anything, but would love to hear more your reactions to, I've talked a lot. It's time for me to be quiet and listen.
It's interesting to ask the question of what we've done, and knowing a little bit of you all and myself, it actually has been a very full year. We all have done a lot. And in some ways, that's a little bit counterintuitive to being in lockdown, where it seems like we can't do anything. But we have done a lot, much of it in relation to COVID and the response, and others not really at all related.
I have been thinking about how much changed at Second Home since we shut down, and how very intimidating it was at first to be with these kids for hours at a time and trying to get them on their computers and learn that whole process. And then it became more kind of mundane and normal. And now it's just managing them while they go back and forth to school. But I guess when anybody asks me how I feel these days, Ellie or anybody, I feel tired. I feel very, very tired, and not like I've been in lockdown and rested.
Mm. 100%. I'm there. And that's one of the pieces of anxiety that I feel coming out of COVID, is because it feels like everything is now supposed to be ramping up again to back to some, ramping up is kind of the feeling of, getting back to normal, getting back to something, but ramping up, when I know for myself and so many of us, we're just exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a great point. Even by kind of taking stock and looking at everything you've done, even just like thinking about it, it's like, oh my gosh.
That's exhausting.
Yeah. I've done a lot, we're tired. And I'm getting the sense there's like this, and being a little depleted, what am I going to do for this next? Is that kind of what you're saying? Like the anxiety, like how on earth, how do we dig deep, or what's that going to be like? Mm-hmm. And and I think when there's language like, back to normal post pandemic, and like, catching up, things like that, the language kind of pulls for like, and it's time, and let's move. And I think a lot of times cognitively we respond to that, and that it's so sometimes we have to be intentional and say, you can hit the pause button, and like, and even like play the opposite, so like, what if you don't do anything? What if you don't jump to it? Now it could be catastrophic, I don't know, but it's still a question to ask, like, okay, what happens if we pause? Or because you may need to pause to recharge, or you may need to pause to figure out the best answer, or the one that's not going to deplete you more. And that, yeah, I think a lot of times we have to pause, particularly if we're in an anxious state. Sometimes, now, admittedly, a lot of times people tend to freeze and they don't get things done. But if instead, with anxiety, we tend to like move, talk faster, get things done, scurry, and that sort of thing, that may be a time to just stop. And as I said, so what do you do instead? Well, okay, sure, maybe think about it, but also maybe think, what if I don't keep doing what I'm doing? What if I do nothing? I ask that question a lot. So but what if you do nothing? And because sometimes anxiety is like not even letting us look at that. Like, oh, okay, keep going. But like if you do nothing, like that could be bad. But at least to know what you're running from. Is that kind of with some of the things that have been shared so far? Is that fitting?
I think for me, when I hear people saying get back to normal, I keep trying to figure out what that means. And of course, for me, my normal coming out of this is going to be totally different, because when I went into this, I was working, and now I'm retired. And so what is next? And how do you not just there's so many good things that I could potentially get in. What is it that I really want to get into? What do I want normal to be? And so I'm not really sure. And I think that's some of what I sense from a lot of people as they talk about this is, what does normal mean now? What have we learned from this year that we don't want to go back to being normal? Or how can we use this crisis to kind of move ourselves forward into not just business as usual? But what does that mean? I think every time I hear people going, oh, we're going to get back to normal, I feel this sort of grab in my gut. What does that mean? What do you mean get back to normal? What part of normal are you referring to? Why are we saying that was normal? And those kinds of questions occur to me.
Yeah, my normal has not been normal for so long. I mean, if I think about what is normal, I have to go back to when I was working maybe, and, still back in school and before my mom died, and that I have to go back to that. And that's what I think of as normal. And since then, everything has kind of, changed dramatically. And I can't go back to that normal where I visited my mom. But that's kind of where I go back to, is a time before she got sick or before she died, or, because all of that kind of coincided with COVID. She'd only been dead a few months. And so then my grieving changed too, because then I felt like I was just, holding on because we're in COVID now. So yeah, it's hard to think about. And what do I want to look at this whole person, somebody that's physically healthy and emotionally healthy and spiritually healthy and intellectually, all of that. And that is exhausting, trying to do all of that to get back to a sense of a balance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying very hard not to be, beating myself, and just taking it as it comes, and breathing it in, and but I do think, like, I admire that so many people have been continuing to be physically active. And at first, maybe I was, but then I got pretty pretty sedentary, staying at home and being pretty sedentary, which is not healthy.
Maybe this theme of going back to normal. On one hand, we feel kind of a burden, or not everyone, but like, individuals may feel a burden to like do that, define that. But I think maybe some of what people are saying is that like there is some good news that like, don't push yourself because that's over. It's almost like, you can't go home. Home blew up. I mean, it's not there. It's not the same. And while on one hand, I mean, yes, that people use the term disorienting. I feel like that word has been used so much more in recent months. So disorienting. But that's where we have an opportunity, and that, just in human nature, it may take some extra time to center. It may take some extra intentionality around this, but we have an opportunity to reevaluate and really look at what is important to us, and what our values, and how to live our lives. That, kind of the gift of COVID. Otherwise, we would have maybe not seized an opportunity to really re-examine our values. Is that too extreme to say kind of the gift of COVID? I'll sometimes say the gift of OCD. So, and it's not a fun one.
Susie's comment made me wonder, or made me think about, not even a year ago, already 13, 14 months ago, when people were kind of using it as an opportunity to focus on self-improvement, on home improvement, on physical health, on eating well, on gardening, on reading, on, I wonder how many of those early COVID practices have developed into habit, or have developed and continued. We were reacting initially to an immediate crisis, and what has living in a duration of in ongoing kind of crisis and trauma, how has that maybe changed some of those initial responses?
I think these are some, a couple thoughts came to mind when you were saying all that, is that what we know, where we've had many learning trials, intergenerationally, but also in our lives, that kind of reinforce we tend to operate a certain way. And that even if with certain life events, there's kind of this regression to the mean, that like after the dust settles, then we tend to kind of go back. So I think that question of like, okay, let me pursue this, and let me, start, how many new habits were formed, or how many life changes, did occur. And some could argue that perhaps the ones that were part of the individual's development that needed some things to come together for that stair-step improvement, COVID helped facilitate, or maybe would have happened anyway, with or without it. I wonder, without commenting too much, just this experience of this collective trauma. I don't know if that resonates for people, if people have feelings about that, because I think that's a term that people are using a lot as well.
I was aware of how much trauma or fear I must have been feeling when it came time to get the vaccines. And I think Brannon shared it when she first got hers, and that was pretty early on. She cried. And I cried when I got the vaccine. And I was so excited, like I was jumping up and down when my dad got the vaccine. So it just tells me how much I was holding on to this fear. And I had, I worked with these kids all year long and I never got sick with COVID. But I was afraid that I might get sick, or I was afraid that my dad would get sick. Yeah, so that was an everyday, I think that we all lived with that everyday fear. And also, it turned us into a little bit, I think, of afraid of other people. So in the store, I I'm naturally somebody that gravitates to people, and I would pull away from people, even strangers, and not engage. So yeah, there was just this underlying fear throughout the whole year.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the things that surprised me about myself as we're starting to come out of this, is going into the store for the first time, and I put on masks because of just feeling like that's what I wanted to do for respect for others, and realizing that when someone without a mask went near me, I would feel anxiety, and just really surprised that I reacted that way. I've like Susie said, I've often, in the store chatted with people, or, been friendly with people, and just resilience to do that, especially if they seem like, they haven't taken it as seriously, or aren't wearing a mask, or, whatever might be going on, and just feeling that sense of anxiety around them, which is very unusual for me. People have not really made me feel anxious in the past. So, and I think for me, so much of what I'm coming out of was the whole sense of really feeling the responsibility of so many people's health through so much of the time. And then all of a sudden having that taken off of me, like in one afternoon, I went from totally responsible to not responsible, and just feeling the shock of that to some extent, I think.
Mhm.
So kind of letting some of this go is a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And hearing that from other people as well, when I talk to people, I'm just not quite sure, do we get together? Do we not get together? When do we celebrate? People are, I think, still really trying to figure all that out, and how do we figure out what's safe, what's not, and what's safe and what's not for other people.
Yeah. Those are really great observations, and I think also great observations to, in speaking to what a lot of individuals are talking about, the times where we're feeling anxious, and it surprises us, and it's a novel situation. When we look at the contagion and mask experience, with people are like, okay, a couple years ago I didn't think twice about that, and then I knew what to do. I knew I was supposed to wear a mask, knew I was supposed to get vaccinated, and now I'm feeling anxious, in a way I've never felt before, and I couldn't have anticipated it. So that feels weird. And I think we're all, I mean, a lot of people are going to be allowing time for that. And, I think one thing, when we, what does that emotion tell us? So for example, when I think about anxiety, or we're treating like anxiety disorders or anxiety problems, that's one thing. And we can talk about that if need be. But also anxiety is an important emotion, just like anger and everything. It helps us. And so I think a lot of us are in a situation where we're feeling anxious. It's not pathological, but I don't understand it. It's like, what is it telling me, and what do I do with it, and also how long do I sit with it? And like I said, having these conversations, like, do we get together? Do we not hug? Just figuring out all those things. Do people end up feeling kind of we're talking about feeling tired? Do we think that's in part what contributes to the fatigue, the chronic anxiety, or maybe other things?
I think for me, maybe for a lot of us, we've been so focused on getting through that we've been operating on a more reactive, more just kind of, I mean, from a more anxious place with and that's exhausting. And part of the anxiety, I've been surprised actually by my level of anxiety in response to the CDC guidelines changing, because all along I've been watching them. I've been, looking to see what all the different research is saying. And I fully expected that we would be seeing this go out in phases. And to all of a sudden have, no, we're going back to normal. I mean, that's what it feels like is kind of being said. While at the same time recognizing we're not, I mean, we still have a lot of people that can't get vaccinated, and we still have, new variants, and we still, this is something we're going to be living with for a long time. But that was jarring for me, was all of a sudden, if you're vaccinated, you can go back to normal, and how that impacts our social lives and our collective lives. Because in some ways, I feel like it almost increases the suspicion or the discomfort around other people. If they're not wearing a mask, is that because they're fully vaccinated, or is it because they don't want to wear a mask? I think probably many of the people that are still out wearing masks in public are fully vaccinated. I mean, just from anecdotal evidence. And thinking about when we do get together in gatherings, who feels comfortable hugging, who feels comfortable shaking hands, who feels more comfortable having masks up, so there's this new element to our social fabric and our social lives together that we're navigating in real time without any blueprint, and at different paces, I think.
Do people, I have some thoughts on that, but I wanted to first ask the question, do you all, can you recall how early on the process of figuring out where do you stand on, masks and your level of contact with people? Because I think everyone, I think around April, May last year, a little bit into June maybe, was having to, was navigating the, where do they stand and where do their, the people that they're going to be associating with. And so there's no kind of right or wrong here. It's like everyone kind of ended up figuring out for themselves where they were, and then stayed in that place, right? In terms of with distance or not. Within, there was probably some changes, but I think a lot of people felt like, yeah, these are my people. These are the, I don't have a pod. I just kind of do everything as usual. There's, all different situations. But then that was pretty consistent. And I think everyone had to kind of find their, the things that they could count on. Like, I don't have to, ask these people every single day. So you're wearing a mask, I mean, a lot of people had to, in our household, we had the conversation. So you said you were going to be wearing masks around patients. Now, are you in fact? Like, yes, but we didn't have that conversation every day. We did have to have that conversation a couple of days until it became a sure thing. It became guaranteed. And I was thinking about that, was like, okay. And so we found at least the organizations and the guidelines that were consistent with what we were doing. And it seems like you're kind of describing an experience where, like, I didn't see that coming. So far I haven't had any reactions to CDC, and what, because that sounds like, that's, whether we thought about it or not, for some individuals, that was kind of like the sure thing. That was like one of your safe people. That was like one of the people in your pod. And similarly, some people are experiencing like, everyone was operating the same. And like, since the CDC guidelines changed, their statement a couple of weeks ago now, people are like, why now? My friends, but my friend's not wearing a mask. What's that about? Or like, they're like getting together, or like kind of this like, why are you doing that? I'm not doing that, but we were doing everything together. Is this kind of fitting for, are you seeing kind of like this, the change that had to settle out and people come together and before, and now it's almost like maybe we're going through kind of a similar thing, like, whoa, where do I land again? What are people's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sense of having to feel like, do I wear a mask here? Do I not wear a mask here? Should I put a mask on? Are you comfortable with me not having a mask? Or these, you know, I got together on Memorial Day with a friend of mine whose grandchildren can't be vaccinated. And so sort of feeling, because they're too little, and sort of feeling, do I let them hug me? They didn't, but they sat very close to me and hadn't seen me for a year and a half. You know, it was wonderful. But I also, you know, I said, do you want me to wear a mask? And I'm very willing to wear a mask, and I tend to still put them on when I go into places that are unfamiliar. But trying to know what to do and ask the people around me, what do you feel comfortable with me doing? What do I feel comfortable with me doing in this situation is new.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I sort of knew I wear a mask. I just, you know, I wear a mask. At work, I wear a mask and a face shield. So there is sort of that, now what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I make sure that people around me feel comfortable and that I feel comfortable around them?
I've found that I have gotten very tired of the mask. At first, I was fine with it. And, you know, at the very beginning, I was making masks. You know, that was my response. And I was amazed. I'd go to the fabric store and there was no more elastic. And everybody was making masks. That's what we were doing. You know, it's like, and I have a friend who's a doctor, and she was like, make masks. We all need masks. There's not going to be enough masks. And there was this huge fear and sense of responsibility that I needed to make masks. Which turned out not to be the case, but I did make lots of masks at first, and then I got very comfortable with my mask. And then here lately, oh law, when the CDC said I could take it off, somebody came to Second Home and said, they just said we don't have to wear it. I took it down immediately. I was just relieved that I can breathe again. And I do still have to wear it at Second Home when I'm inside. I don't have to wear it outside anymore. So that's just a big relief. And I have been in places where people say, you know, the stores say, if you're fully vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask. And so I take it. I say, fine. I think, Ellie, what I've heard is 1 in 10,000 chance of getting sick if you're fully vaccinated. Like, this was an amazing vaccine. I didn't have any bad side effects, and now I'm protected. And that's an amazing thing.
The mask thing is taken on so many meanings and interpersonal implications, and it's caused some rifts, you know, in some places, of course, and has united other people with like the Making Masks campaigns. You probably notice I always try to kind of check in, well, what's the body telling us, which is why I kind of pulled some of the things that I had. And what we often don't speak to is that the thing is with wearing a mask, we haven't been breathing properly, or we haven't been breathing as we naturally do, I should say, for a long time. And, you know, I don't know. And I think that impacts people differently. And I think we also need to recognize that the experience of that and what and the impact that has had is not something that we can very easily reflect on, because that's a little more of a cognitive, like frontal lobe process. But in fact, basically, if we send the signals to our brainstem that we're not breathing the same way as we had before, it's getting a message. And I think we all differ in terms of how strongly or the lower levels of our brain process that. And so I think I try to, kind of just hold that and keep that in mind. That there have been a lot of reactions and feelings to the mask stuff that are really hard to put into words. Is that making sense? Kind of how I'm talking about that, with kind of the body's response to that? And,
I've been at the store, so that's why I've muted and not done the video. But the masks, we're not requiring, the market isn't requiring people to wear masks. But we told our employees, why don't you just keep wearing it, as a precaution, because you don't know who's vaccinated and who's not. So I wear my mask and people walk in and go, oh, do I have to wear my mask? And so then, so but I hear you about the breathing, because now that I'm used to not wearing a mask, except when I come here, I do feel more constricted and stuff. So it's a challenge.
Mhm.
But that's why I've been muted and not showing my face much, because people have been coming in.
We're glad you're here.
I'm glad people are coming in, Anne.
Yes, we've had a very good day already, and I've run into several Presbyterians.
You always do.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the masks have taken on a life of their own. And, we've seen it throughout, the people that from the very beginning were anti-mask, and there's still anger and in some cases violence that's directed towards people that are wearing masks now, which is unsettling. And what it says about you, or what it says about others, if you are wearing a mask or aren't wearing a mask, it says a lot more than the cloth.
And I think it's at a point where we end up having kind of, it doesn't even go into processing. It's kind of our automatic, whatever one's interpretation is, or what it kind of means for someone to be or not in certain situations. It's not even that we have to really actively reflect on it. It's just like, kind of automatic. Or I can see that, being the case a lot of the times.
And to thank you to Susie for making masks. It really was a scary time and difficult time, because we as healthcare providers were being told people had to be in masks, and we didn't have enough and we couldn't find them. So the people who were sewing, yes, later we ended up with an abundance, but in the beginning, in the first few months, it was really difficult, because at the same time we were saying everyone has to be in a mask, we didn't have them to give people. And so it was very, very much needed, and really did help us as it was time to get them out to our staff people and our individuals. A lot of our individuals wore them as well.
That certainly was not like Anne Renard. I was not making that many masks. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a few weekends running around doing nothing but collecting masks from people and being very grateful, and then dropping them off at houses and keeping inventories of who had masks and who didn't have masks. And when new people were hired, one of the first things we did was give them 2 masks. So, it was really.
And just conversations about masks, like, who made your mask? Where'd you get that mask? I really like your mask. That's a different, it's just so weird that it became a norm.
Well, and we had a handful of Christmas masks.
Mhm.
And when we got them, people had used the material, I guess, that they had. So we got them, and I remember looking at them going, gosh, we shouldn't be needing these by Christmas.
Mm.
And then, of course, everyone trying to say, do you still have some Christmas masks? And
actually think that was part of the hard thing. I mean, Ellie, you're talking about us initially having to negotiate where we were in terms of our pods and our precautions that we were following and all of that. But then when the surge hit again, right before the holidays, I saw a lot of renegotiated practices among my friends and family in particular. People that, I may have cautiously gotten together with before just canceled all of their social things. And so coming from that even more extreme kind of sense of feeling locked down and needing to isolate and protect to vaccines. And, it's a complete 180 for some people. I have a dear friend whose parents are both medically susceptible if they were to get it. And I mean, they completely isolated at a cabin in West Virginia for the pandemic. They got their vaccines. She and her husband have gotten their vaccines, and they still are anxious about being together, even though they've quarantined. I mean, it's just lots of different levels of comfort and practice there.
It's likely, all those things that have to be considered and negotiated, and basically what we keep talking about is like, okay, we had to do this, we had to adjust in this way, we had to, and new efforts, and that, not just business as usual, not just operating the machine, but like, okay, now how are we going to do this? Okay, how are we going to do this? And, humans, they tend to problem solve. They tend to, unless they're paralyzed by anxiety and get frozen, they tend to, okay, do what needs to be done. Nevertheless, there's the cost. People are tired. And kind of looking back, I mean, I think it is important to, if people are hesitant to be like, okay, I just want to put all that behind me, let's move forward. I usually would ask, but why? Because again, there's a lot of information of where we've been. Sometimes we need to appreciate where all we've been. Sometimes I think we also need to see if you're worried about what's coming up, have you learned that you can handle a lot, or have you learned that you actually are adaptable? If I like to ask this kind of question, like, if I asked you 4 years ago, there's going to be this global pandemic and your lifestyle is going to, completely change. And it's going to be like, not like a week. It's going to be like a year, longer. And for a period of time, you're not even going to know if you can eat the food in the grocery store. I mean, and the doctors won't be able to tell you, I mean, it's just going to be like one of those crazy blockbuster movies. I mean, what would you have said? I mean, do you know yourself a few years ago what you would have said to a fortune like that?
I probably would have said something along the lines of, you can't live in fear. And I've actually had this experience a few times where I've been in conversations with people who, I remember a ministerial association meeting a dozen years ago where people were looking to a solar flare of some kind that they thought was going to paralyze the entire grid. And so they were ready with bags packed and 5 years worth of food and water and, all these things. And at times I think, well, I'm not ready for any kind of emergency like that, but you can't live in fear. So I guess, I'd still say that, but I remember actually when, I don't even remember where it was, but I remember Andy and Francis Sale early in 2020 saying that one of their sons who worked high-level intelligence was talking about a potential pandemic. And this was right as COVID was emerging, but it wasn't even talking about COVID necessarily. It was just, there's a potential pandemic. And so that was my first inkling that there may be something bigger that's coming. but even at that time, my cognitive dissonance was, it's not going to happen here. It's not going to, I can't imagine that. There's no way we could prepare for such a thing. Therefore, don't worry and don't think about it.
Mhm. Any of us can send, in my opinion, any of us can send ourselves into a true panic attack if we consider all the possible things that can happen, right? And that you can live in fear. And that's some of what I work with individuals, that like they might get kind of stuck on something that it's like you can't, yes, that's a possibility, but do you want to live that way? But there is this kind of beauty in recognizing that like you can't live predicting, like, I mean, it's not a way to live. It's not sustainable. I mean, to live in fear like that, you just can't. Something's got to give. But in recognizing that, if I told you that ahead of time, that this is coming, and you're going to figure it out, I ask this question of people that sometimes have to get over the hump of whatever their fear is. And again, I address phobias, OCD, that sort of thing. And that a lot of times it is really, helpful. And I think people need to own their successes. When they get over the hump, they're just so glad to finally get there, to get over the hump. But then I'll go back and say, so if I told you when we first met that you're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, your greatest fear, and you're going to be rocking it. And usually people are like, I would have fired you, or like, you're crazy. But to be on the other side of it, like, yeah, I did it. On the, the perspective is helpful for kind of consolidating, like, what basically accessing maybe some of the things that'll give some energy. Maybe some things will just help kind of give some peace, so that you can just recognize like, okay, I can weather this next storm. Or maybe it's even just a moment of being able to kind of celebrate, like, okay, I can't think of any person I know who hasn't shown, some triumph, has really rallied in some way, or some success in all this that they have every right to own. I'm wondering what y'all's thoughts are on like kind of owning what it means to kind of, own those successes, or however you think about it. Any reactions?
Well, I was sort of thinking about the, throwing a frog in boiling water, that metaphor. If you throw it in boiling water, it's going to jump out. But if you slowly turn up the heat, it's going to die. But this doesn't relate, except that if we had been thrown into the boiling water, I think we would have jumped out. But we were able to adapt because the heat just slowly became, what was happening, and we had to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the successes, I feel like Second Home in general, that's my reference, has been successful. We did not know that we could pull off taking care of 60 kids all day long from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. And we did it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was hurt. Nobody got very sick. We had one period of time where we had to shut down one time. So I think that was a big success. I do think in terms of my own personal experiences this year, I was more afraid of COVID when I got the cancer diagnosis, and I decided not to continue to work. And turns out I probably would have been fine. I think that was the right decision at the time. But that whole thing, I was telling Stephanie the other day, it's just like a blip. I mean, sometimes I forget that I actually kind of had this thing happen in the middle of COVID that was a scary thing, and didn't have a reference for it. And then it's over, it's just, thank God, it was just over. But yeah, I think that's a success that we got through that. I didn't have anything to do with getting through with it. I appreciate the doctors that did it, but.
Mm-hmm. No, but that's great. And I heard what you said, like it was a blip. I mean, like, you know.
In terms of this whole year,
Yeah.
that was a blip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, you know,
I think
Well,
it is. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the way Trinity has been able to be online, and, you know, we've had people from South Africa and Germany and Canada, and, you know, I spent a lot of time away being a grandma and was able to connect. So, you know, it's been a blessing, I think, and really kind of got Trinity's name out there in a greater sense in one way. So kudos to the tech team and Stephanie and others for, I mean, that's a huge success, really. And I might add, I think Eleanor's had a success starting a business, a second store during the pandemic. You know, it seemed a little crazy at the time, but it really has been what kept us afloat. So that's been a success when so many businesses have gone under.
And I think some of the successes are just things that we've learned, like how tech savvy some people have come with Zoom and other kinds of things. The real blessing of having had some of these technological, I don't know how we would have gotten through this without some of the advances that we've had in Zoom and Teams and GoToMeetings and all those different things that have really kept us going. But I'm very impressed with how many people have learned how to handle all those things and how to use them smoothly and well. And you know, you think about the Sanctuary House Church, and we've continued to meet weekly, and everyone gets on to Zoom, and people can now share their screens when they're doing worships and get the sound to work and all kinds of things. It's very impressive and amazing.
Mhm.
I will say I cannot wait for fellowship and nurture. I mean, I can't wait for worship to be in person, but I really cannot wait for fellowship and nurture not to be Zoom, because that part has not felt very fulfilling to me. It's not the same as getting to walk up to somebody in the Commons and chat. And yeah, worship has been amazing. It can't do everything. And maybe other people have found that fellowship has been nice that way. I don't know.
I've been surprised at the fact that I have found Zoom to be as satisfying as at first I was very resistant to all of our work meetings and such things being by Zoom. And we had to do it. I don't mean resistant and not wanting to do it, but just feeling like this is not a way we can communicate. But I've been impressed with how people have handled it. And yes, I want to get back in the room with people. And we had a meeting to plan the worship for the 27th and in person. And we were so taken with the fact that we were in person. I think we were having a little trouble concentrating on the planning for a little while, but certainly, yes. But I think for us not to lose some of the things that we've learned during this time period, I think will be important as well.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see also how this has made worship more accessible for some people, for a good number of people, not just those that are far away, but I know, Susie, you've talked about your dad being able to see better than he has in person. And, for those who otherwise have health issues or other concerns that have kept them from coming to worship in person, it's been more accessible. I'm curious if we have any idea or know anything about kind of the psychological process of coming out of the 1918 pandemic and what that was like.
I haven't read anything on that. Now, that's not to say, and in fact, I want to make a note of that, because as I see we're starting to approach time, kind of where do we want to go from here? You know, because I do want to kind of keep in mind kind of with where we've landed here, what feels like, or what feels, you know, I'm interested in feedback basically and thoughts in terms of the part two with this, which, because I think today, so I'll kind of, so my short answer, Stephanie, to yours is like, I don't know. And that is, I know a question others have asked. And so, but I can also kind of do some digging and see, you know, what, you know, we look at history and see what lessons have we learned from that, or what things should maybe be on our radar, which I think will be valuable, hopefully. And in today, you know, I think kind of some kind of bottom line, or I guess some kind of key points that we come back to is like, it's okay to reflect on where we've been, that we may need to do that and actually look at, we hadn't said this, but like, we're different, you know, we've had losses, we've had gains maybe, but we're different, and they may take some time, and we have time. I think we have to remind ourselves, like, because we've got to take the time, whatever time it takes, to figure out how have we been impacted by all of this, good, bad, and otherwise, and what do we want to do with that, and what do we need to do with that. And so I kind of feel like that's the next kind of thing, and maybe kind of the part two, like after you've kind of found your center, at least know a little bit more about where you are and where you want to go, and also what your current concerns are in the post-pandemic sort of thing. That may be a direction we go. So again, what are remaining thoughts, questions that also could be for part two? I'm all ears.
One thing that kind of occurred to me as you were talking is thinking of the losses we've had this year with the deaths that have occurred, that when we do come back together, instead of, okay, this one Sunday we have this one person not here, and this, you know, a couple of months later we have another person who's not there. When we come together, how will we feel that there are these people who we've grieved, but we haven't grieved the loss of being in the sanctuary with them one by one or something? Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've thought a lot about the fact that, like, Chalice and Mary Lou often sat behind us, but you know, and Jim Atwood, and you know, and other people that we always grieved in.
I see where they sit in the sanctuary.
Right. And so there will be blank chairs.
As Joe Biden has been saying a lot, you know, there'll be an empty chair at the table. Yeah. There will be 5 empty chairs.
So what will that mean to us in terms of grieving? How will that affect the congregation? I think is a question we need to think about.
Yeah, Ellie is the elder convener for Harvest Team. As we look at that first Sunday back, it'll be Labor Day weekend, but you know, we last year used that as a mission last year we used that as a mission celebration, in-house church closing, virtually, and you know, thoughts about doing a similar thing this year, but also what do we need in that time and space to recognize where we are and where we've been.
And sometimes I wonder if that's part of the anticipatory anxiety with like what this means. It's like recognizing that what's to come is recognizing how things have changed, what's missing, what's forever changed or forever gone. I think maybe there's kind of anticipation of that, whereas normally we, you know, the grief process gets to naturally unfold in a little more in real time. So grief is one.
And if that first Sunday back together is Communion Sunday, yeah, it's going to be huge. I don't know that we have to talk about it because we don't know what it's going to feel like or look like, but I can anticipate that I can feel it inside of me if I walk back into that congregation, into that sanctuary, and see those people together. It's not the same as being at Massanetta. I will feel a lot of emotion.
I've actually been really grateful that we've had this interim time at Massanetta as kind of a working back towards worship in the sanctuary, because it is different, and that's what we expect it to be different. And we know it's going to be different when we're back in the sanctuary together, but it's going to hit us differently.
It's probably the thing that I have grieved the most this year is missing being together. I don't miss going out to dinner. I don't, I have missed vacations or seeing friends, but missing worship and missing my church community, my church family, has been the thing I've grieved probably the most.
And we still don't know even what that's going to look like when we come back,
Be smaller groups, or do you have to sign up to come to worship? Do we still have to wear a mask? All those questions. Yeah.
I will say at this point that our plan is to continue to ask people to wear masks, including building users, because recognizing that not everybody can be vaccinated and others remain particularly vulnerable. And, we're going to continue to meet and revisit and revise as it makes sense to do that. But that is going to be a place, even when we come back, where a lot of other places are not going to be doing that. But right now, that is our plan, to continue to ask people to mask to make a safe, inclusive community for all who are gathered. And that's going to be hard.
Are there any things for a wish list or need in terms of continuing this coming out of COVID discussion for next week? We got the same room reserved for next Thursday.
I wonder what we might think about in terms of, I mean, probably the kids are way more resilient than we are, honestly, but recognizing that they are going to be in a different place in terms of their ongoing risk, as long as they can't get vaccines, and living in kind of different worlds of everybody's not wearing masks, but we still have to, and what it's going to have meant for 18 months not be in social situations with other people. The increasing levels of anxiety that we're seeing in other ways that are coming out for kids. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I welcome people if, you have thoughts after, or, let me know. And we'll continue on with some, I think we've got some good kind of specifics, maybe to follow up on with these things, and some of the, what we anticipate, or what we anticipate is, some of this is like, we anticipate this being big, but we don't even know. What do we prepare for? How do we prepare? What needs to be on our radar, and what do we not need to, what worry can we suspend? I think these are the things. It's like, okay, how do we pace ourselves in this?
And I think probably too, some of the things that will happen that will surprise people who are maybe not attending this or not watching it, who, once we do get together, will be surprised by how they react, and how do we as a church support them through that too, and be sensitive and aware of unexpected responses.
Mhm. There are a lot of surprises right now. I mean, we've seen it in all of the areas in which we work and are and experience. Um, yeah, in my world, a lot of emotional reactions, and people are like, "Oh, I had a panic attack. I have it. Why? Nothing's like, things are different." We're not operating from baseline, and so surprises are coming. Surprises are coming. So we'll be on a ride as we have been. But I'll also try to, some of the things that we just know, I'll try to, be sure and include the things that do tend to, genuinely sustain people and provide hope and help with centering, but also restoring, because we're going to need that in this pacing process.
Thank you very much, Ellie,
Thank you.
for leading us. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here.
Look forward to next week.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
So
Bye.
peace, love,
Love and life.
Thank you.
here.